Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'd like to build a little bit more on my Roxas and boxes metaphor. So for those of you who have not yet watched the original video, please go back and do that first. It contains a lot of information that will be helpful in just kind of having a baseline understanding or foundation for what I'm going to add on to today. So go ahead and listen to that first one if you haven't already. If you have, great. Let's get into it. What I would like to ask as kind of a follow-up question or kind of explore a bit today, in addition to building on the last one, is who does the box belong to? It's a really relevant and really important question for a number of reasons. One reason is that the person that we find ourselves in that storage room of conflict with, and the boxes that I mentioned the last time that sometimes we get a little bit distracted and we start taking rocks from different boxes that are on the shelves or around, and we start bringing those into the current conversation and conflict, which isn't the most convenient. Well, convenient. It's not the most helpful. It's not the most productive, right? But it's important to note also that sometimes those boxes that we take rocks from, they have another person's name on them, right? They don't actually belong to the person who's there in the room with us. Classic example could be, we have a conflict at work, maybe we have a run-in with our boss or with a colleague, and something rubs us the wrong way. We're not feeling great. We come home, and that ends up getting dumped on our spouse or on one of our children, right? Maybe they do something or say something that kind of triggers us or sets us off and reminds us of all that pent-up energy from work or whatever it might be, right? But the point is, we direct maybe to that spouse, that child, frustration and upset that does not belong to them. It's not related to them. It's not theirs, right? It doesn't involve them. But they get it kind of thrown at them anyway. So really not a nice thing. It's not fair. It's not justified, right? And it's normal for there to be some pushback from the person who kind of is at the receiving end of that, because who of us wants to assume responsibility for something that we're not accountable for, right? Something that isn't ours. Part of us knows that, and we tend to kind of push back against that, right? So it's not really a productive thing to get wrapped up in. So making sure that we know who the different boxes belong to, and making sure that we only explore boxes that are relevant to the individual that we're in the room with, right? Keep that relevance there, and make sure that those are tailored to the right individual and that we're not kind of crisscrossing and applying things that are really not relevant to the person that we're with. Also recognizing that also within the context of the box that brings us there in the first place, right? So we're brought to that room of conflict by, a current conflict. Sometimes the box that brings us there actually doesn't have either person's name on it. It might have someone else's name on it. It might be unlabeled, right? Sometimes it's not yours. The thing that brings you there, you can both be upset about it, you can both be triggered by it, but maybe it doesn't belong to either of you. That can happen sometimes. And so paying attention and just being cognizant of, okay, not only what's in this box, but what's on the label, whose name is on there. Does it have one of our names on it? Does it have both of our names on it? Does it have neither of our names on it? All of that is really important and important information to have, right? Now, the boxes that are in our personal conflict rooms or storage rooms, they should ideally have our names on them together with, if there might be another person that it involves, but there should be shared ownership. We should not be shelving or giving personal storage space to boxes that do not belong to us. We can visit someone else's storage room, and again, these boxes can be reflective of conflicts. They can be personal traumas. They can be grief, right? They can just things that have weight, and that are negative or difficult to to carry and go through. We can reach out in empathy and we can be there and we can support, but we should not be storing other people's luggage or other people's, boxes in our storage units or storage spaces that do not have personal relevance or ownership, that we're not at least partially responsible for or partially the owner of. So being careful of that, recognizing it and paying attention to that. Sometimes there are boxes, again, that don't belong to either you or the other person. Sometimes there are boxes there that are unlabeled or that are labeled, but they have a name of someone who isn't really close to you, who you don't have, a deep or meaningful relationship with. And so those boxes need to be returned, return to sender, just label it properly, send it back. And you can choose how you go about this. Some discernment is helpful in this area. Sometimes it is actually helpful and appropriate to approach a person and take that back to them or send it back to them and say, look, this is yours. I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to take personal responsibility for it. I'm not going to deal with it, right? Other times that's not the most helpful, but just maybe taking it outside, leaving it in front of the door or something, letting the person come and collect it or not, that's on them. But the idea is get that out of your space, right? The only boxes that should be in our personal storage rooms should be boxes that have at least partial relevance and significance to us, right? Where we own at least part of it. And that requires some wrestling. It requires some humility. It requires some reflection and critical thinking. There are some things that do belong to us that we don't want to own fully, right? That's not always a comfortable feeling. And we can ask people around us sometimes for help, trusted individuals who are safe spaces, who can add kind of a third person perspective and offer some clarity. It can be helpful, to ask sometimes is this mine? Does this really belong to me? Do I have something to contribute to this? Or is this really not relevant to me at all? Sometimes getting an outside perspective can be helpful with that. But being critical about this is important because there are also a lot of people who will try to confuse ownership sometimes, who will try to pass off their boxes as yours or get other people to assume responsibility for that, right? And try to kind of pawn that off on other people. Sometimes some people, or some of us even from time to time, just kind of throw a Hail Mary and see what sticks, right? We just kind of throw it everywhere and see if anyone will take responsibility for it or take it with them. And some of this is intentional and conscious. Some of it can be malicious. Some of it can be actually very pointed and very direct. Sometimes there are individuals who, handpick and choose who they are going to direct these efforts to and try to get to assume responsibility or kind of take some of those boxes from them, right? So sometimes this is very active, very conscious, very intentional. Other times it's very subconscious or very unintentional, right? Sometimes it's just we're in distress and we don't know what to do and we try our best and we just kind of throw it everywhere out of a sense of desperation, right? And so it can be well-wishing, it can be not so much, but the fact remains that it happens quite often where ownership of those boxes can get confused, right? And so exercising some critical thinking, some curiosity, and kind of keeping inventory of our own rooms and making sure that we own what is in there can be really a relevant and helpful thing to look at.